The controversy surrounding the New York Times and Brett Kavanaugh has continued to escalate, with new information emerging that the New York Times actually had evidence in their story which casts doubt on this new allegation and removed it. They removed it intentionally. It was the editors. Now, this is a complicated circumstance, and I don't want to imply, I want to be very careful. The authors weren't necessarily trying to mislead, but the information was omitted. Combining this with other bits of information that were omitted, and I personally feel it was intentional. Now, I lean only slightly towards it being intentional because I always say, never attribute to malice that which can be explained by incompetence. It's Hanlon's razor. But in this circumstance, a lot of information was omitted. Now, look, this is the third video I'm doing on Kavanaugh, and it's kind of frustrating. But there's an important reason outside of the fake news why I highlight this. The Kavanaugh effect is widely believed to have helped Republicans in the Senate in 2018. That by coming out with these outrageous stories about Brett Kavanaugh and smearing him, Republicans were riled up and it strengthened Trump's base. Though we do have a lot of interesting tidbits here having to do with fake news and media malfeasance, we also have the very real impact this might have in bolstering Republicans and the right. You know what, man? Look, I feel like I've shown the data over and over again that people feel the left is going too far left. The New York Times has said the left has veered very far to the left, and the data shows it. I've shown all of the charts. I'm not going to get into it. For those that aren't familiar for whatever reason, a new book is coming out. It came out, I believe, yesterday or today. And the New York Times published a story, for some reason, not in the news section, but the opinion section, which claims there's a new allegation not actually made by the victim, but by a third party who may have witnessed a story and then conveyed that story to these journalists. And now all of a sudden, there are calls for Brett Kavanaugh's impeachment. The reason why this is so alarming is that the New York Times knew there was no victim, and the accusations are essentially being denied because the woman apparently has no recollection of any of these incidents. That was removed from the story, as you can see here from the Hill. So let's just jump right in. And I want to go through the Kavanaugh effect, how this is going to help Trump, and even The View on ABC is saying so. I know they're going to say, Tim, why are you acting like it's always helping the Republicans? It's The View, dude. It's Whoopi Goldberg and other View hosts who are saying this. It is not just my personal opinion. Sane, rational people are watching the fake news play right into Trump's hands, but more importantly, prove Trump right. When Trump says there's no fact checking, it's fake news, well, what do you want people to believe when this keeps happening? And they did it on purpose. Let's start with the Hill. Before we get started, though, head over to timcast.com/donate. If you would like to support my work, there's a PayPal option, a crypto option, a physical address, but the best thing you can do is share this video. I am directly competing with these powerful mainstream media organizations, and YouTube props them up. Not an exaggeration. We've seen it in the data. They give a boost to CNN and MSNBC and Fox News. If you think I do a good job, well, YouTube deranks my channel. There's one thing they can't derank, though, your willingness to share this content if you think it's good. If you think I do a good job and you think more people should hear what I have to say, then please consider sharing this video, but by no means should you feel obligated. I would just greatly appreciate it, and it would help me continue doing my work. Let's read the first story from The Hill, and then I've got, I think, 4 more instances of omitted information that's very interesting. The Hill reports, the 2 New York Times reporters who co-authored a controversial essay about Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh said Tuesday that there was zero intent to mislead anyone on the new incident of misconduct detailed in the story. We really tried to look at things from a 360-degree perspective. That's from Kate Kelly, one of the co-authors, who told Lawrence O'Donnell Monday night. The essay was adapted from a forthcoming book by Kelly and Robin Pogrebin titled The Education of Brett Kavanaugh, an Investigation. However, what they say essentially is that they had the woman's name in it. She's the alleged victim who doesn't remember any of this. And an editor took out the full sentence, which included a clarification that she did not want to be interviewed and didn't remember any of this happening. They also apparently took out information where her friend said the same thing. They say the correction triggered widespread outrage from conservatives, with President Trump seizing on it several times. No, I'm sorry. Even the left is criticizing them over this. The View, for instance. But for some reason, the narrative is always that conservatives are the only ones outraged by this. Listen, there is a sane, rational, left-wing, group of people. They exist. And they have principled opposition to this. The New York Times failed on a standard journalistic level. In fact, some more important information is that the story was passed up by the news section of the Times and then pushed to the opinion section. But let's read. They say, Pogrebin told O'Donnell the woman's name and the reference to her, not remembering the incident, were initially included in the article, but were taken out during the editing process. I got to call BS on this. Just hold on. I think it was just done in haste of the editing process, she said. Kelly added that their hope was that people will look at the book, which is a much fuller context about the incident and the allegations. Okay, you're saying that you wrote an op-ed which had an important clarification the alleged victim doesn't recall and doesn't want to be interviewed, and it was taken out by the editor, and you didn't notice. I believe personally all of these omissions, and there are more, are intentional. I kid you not, there's another instance where they did the same thing. I believe personally they knew it would sell books. It would generate buzz, and it would bring us exactly where we are today, with outraged commentary, with television interviews, with a presidential response, and with people like me on YouTube ranting and raving about it. That's my personal opinion. If the editor took out that sentence, either they're grossly incompetent, which, is entirely possible, or it was on purpose. Because if the editor made changes, he'd send it back. Presumably this is how it operates in most newsrooms, at least my understanding, and they would look at the edits and say, hey, whoa. You took out very important context here. They said nothing. So it's entirely possible the New York Times is just really, really bad at what they do. But I've got to say this. Based on who they've been hiring, people, I'm not going to drop names in this particular instance. I'm going to avoid getting into all the details. But the New York Times has hired very offensive individuals. We've seen leaked conversations about critical race theory. And they're the paper of record. What does that mean? I doubt of all of the newsrooms, the New York Times would make a glaring mistake in not recognizing an edit to a piece which changed the context. But I would believe, based on who they've hired and the statements they've made, they have a political motivation. That's just my opinion, okay? But let me move forward and show you things that back this up. Next story we have comes from the Federalist that notes this information about the woman not remembering was omitted from an NPR interview as well. If they were going to do an interview about this and talk about this story, but omit this key detail, I have to wonder why. Check this out. It's not that they mentioned the most important fact and it was edited out of NPR. In fact, the omission was so significant that Gross recorded an update and inserted it into the show immediately thereafter, noting the omission and how it has also had to be corrected at the New York Times. Pogrebin and Kelly have a pattern of omitting this detail and other key details. Now, let's talk about possibly the most glaring omission of all. I didn't believe this next bit was real. I kid you not. When I saw the initial tweet making this next claim, I said, that's fake news. There's no way that's real. But here it is. From the Washington Examiner, certified by NewsGuard, green check marks across the board, except for disclosing financing. The New York Times reporter behind Kavanaugh article knew him in college and was in his freshman year dorm. I kid you not. How was this not in the story? I was in Brett's class at Yale, she admitted. They were classmates. It didn't influence it. We weren't friends. I knew him to kind of say hello. It doesn't matter. That is a glaring conflict of interest. I can't believe that. Pogrebin went on to say, I had varsity athletes as roommates and he hung with a kind of athletic crowd, and so we overlapped to that extent. But she said it helped her reach out to people. In the episode, which aired on October 2nd, 2018, Pogrebin acknowledged they were classmates, said she was in his freshman year dorm, and that she had a vague memory of him. Kelly also revealed she grew up in the Washington, D.C. area and went to a private all-girls school, which was similar to Kavanaugh's schooling. However, she did acknowledge that her school has not been linked to Kavanaugh's school. Point being, you would think I was in Brett's class at Yale would be a very, very, very significant bit of information that needs to be placed in the story. Now, she can come out and say, I don't remember him, we weren't friends. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because I can't make that assumption. If we look back at yearbooks and we look back at the class history and see that they were classmates, that is a glaring omission. That is a significant omission and a major, major conflict of interest. And I'll tell you why. Outside of the fact there's a potential personal relationship here, potentially a personal vendetta, she might actually know people who know Kavanaugh and have shared information. they are potentially in conflicting social circles. There may be someone she knows who knows Kavanaugh who doesn't like Kavanaugh. I can't believe they omitted this. It's amazing. But then it gets even more interesting. I got to admit, this is ridiculous. Amanda Prestigiacomo, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. I'm really bad at pronouncing names, apparently. She said, the New York Times reporter Robin Pogrebin admitted on The View that she wrote the initial tweet. Now, you can't really see it, but the initial tweet said, having privates thrust in your face may seem like harmless fun, but Deborah Ramirez, yada, yada. The reason that's significant is because the initial tweet framed it as though it was a fact. They presented information to assume it was true without saying it was disputed. Now, the tweet had to be deleted, but then Amanda goes on to say, Pogrebin wrote the Kavanaugh smear article in the Times opinion section, apparently after the news board passed, and omitted the fact that the accuser couldn't recall the incident. Accuser did not want her name revealed. Pogrebin used her name in the book anyway. Now, Amanda did go on to add that there is no real accuser because she didn't go on the record. But we do have a bit more information here. Actually, I think this is the wrong one. What I wanted to highlight here is this section from the Daily Wire. We'll go back to the other one in a second. Asked why the bombshell claim was published in the review section, which is part of the opinion desk, rather than the news section, Dow, who's the editor who removed the important information, said, it's not unusual for essays in the review to break news. But according to Vanity Fair, that's not the full story. Kelly and Pogrebin's sources told the outlet initially pitched their scoop to the news side, but the editors felt, quote, there wasn't enough juice to warrant a story. So what do we have here? There was no story. In fact, I covered yesterday, the Washington Post passed on this. We now know, this I can't believe. This is amazing, that apparently this is a Pogrebin who was a classmate of Kavanaugh's. How does this not, it's mind-blowing. And apparently Max Stier, the guy making the claim, worked with the Clintons in some capacity. I don't have that pulled up, and I didn't pull it up on purpose because I don't want to get into the Clinton stuff. I really, really don't. But I do think these weird conflicts of interest that keep coming up, I have to wonder why it keeps getting omitted. Now, I highlight this here just to show you that it did fall into news analysis like they claim. Now, what I was going to highlight here before is just to reiterate that a very important point in this story that was omitted initially back in the initial reporting. I did mention this yesterday, but I want to stress this moving forward because we're going to get into the Kavanaugh effect now. So Leland Kaiser was apparently the friend of Christine Blasey Ford, who was at the party with Kavanaugh where all this went down, suggested there was pressure on her to toe the line. In other stories, it essentially sounds like friends of Ford were essentially threatening this woman, saying if you don't say it happened, then bad things will happen. I stress this because now I want to start getting into the Kavanaugh effect. What this means is back in last year, when all this went down, it is believed, and I've got the sources, I'll show you, the Republicans were helped in the Senate, not the House. And that even Vox.com, VOX, predicted would be the case. I believe. I don't want to get ahead of myself. But first, let's do this. The Daily Caller, highlighting this segment from The View. View co-hosts call out New York Times over edited Kavanaugh story. You're helping Trump get reelected. Even Whoopi Goldberg is saying, how is this happening? Check this out. The comments came during a panel discussion on the ABC talk show Monday about a new allegation by a former classmate, Max Stier, who says he saw classmates push Kavanaugh while he was exposed into a female classmate at a party, Whoopi Goldberg explained, while noting how after the article came out, Democratic presidential hopefuls called for his impeachment. However, the article didn't mention the female student declined to be interviewed and that her friends say she doesn't recall the incident. This is Whoopi Goldberg. Now the incident apparently is in the book, and the authors of the book will be here tomorrow, but I guess the question is, who edited the article to go into the Times? You know what I mean. And then we see, Meghan McCain brings it up, and Abby Huntsman then basically comes out and says, you're playing right into the president's hands. You are helping him get reelected. But I got to stress this point. Yes, it's fair to say you're playing into his hands, but can we be real for a second? You're proving him right. That's it. You're proving him right. It's not about playing into his hands. That sort of insinuates the president was lying about what the media does. No, you're adding circumstantial evidence to the court of public opinion that when the president calls out the press for lying, that he was right the whole time. I can't believe this is where we're at so far. So we then can see even Morning Joe on MSNBC slamming the New York Times. This is not a left and right thing. Everyone is now seeing this. When you get Joe Scarborough on talking about this, saying, how did this happen? The View, Whoopi Goldberg. They say in the Hill piece, the conservatives are ranking. I'm sorry. But we got to move on. I want to lightly mention this as we pass through. Judge Napolitano says Brett Kavanaugh may actually have a case for suing the New York Times. Now, I don't want to get into full details, but I just want to highlight, if an editor at the Times removed that segment, which we know to be true now, yeah, that might be actual malice, meaning that reckless disregard for the truth, that they knew there was doubt on the story and they omitted a key fact that made Brett Kavanaugh look worse. But we must carry on. How to remove Brett Kavanaugh without impeaching him, Vox says. Yes, because the left is now saying, based on this, it's time to move forward. I kid you not, CNN. How to impeach a Supreme Court justice. This is where we are now. Even though the story's been debunked, even though we know there's been a ton of conflicts of interest and omitted information, we're still seeing this. And I have to wonder why. Well, I believe it all comes down to, for one, political expedience. They know that they can gain from this regardless because the truth is irrelevant. All that matters is they have the narrative and people will believe it. So they're going to move forward. When the New York Times story came out, like I showed you, that tweet that talked about, it was all harmless fun. That's a framing device. It presents disputed facts with no corroboration as if it was true. It assumes it was true. So the average person sees that. And the outrage was about downplaying the misconduct instead of whether or not it was even true. You see how they jumped the gun? They've now created a circumstance where because they downplayed the misconduct, everyone assumes the misconduct actually happened. But let's check out now the Kavanaugh effect. Back in 2018, we saw Vox asking the question, will the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation hearings help Republicans? In one section, they say this. They dispute it. They don't know for sure because this is an old story. What the Kavanaugh fight means for voter enthusiasm. So that looks like the story of the horse race. The Kavanaugh fight might be helping Republicans in the Senate while making little difference in the House, where Democrats remain cautious favorites. But the other outstanding question is about voter enthusiasm. Is the contentious confirmation process going to motivate Republicans and erase what until now seemed to be a Democratic energy advantage? Once again, the evidence is mixed. It doesn't lend itself to an easy narrative. But I will stress, this is an old story. We now have the gift of hindsight. They say it looks like it was helping Republicans in the Senate and making little difference in the House. And what happened? Democrats took the House, Republicans gained in the Senate. Exactly what we expected to see. Isn't that crazy? It may be true. The Kavanaugh effect has done this. And so what do you think happens next? Republicans credit the Kavanaugh effect for Senate wins against red state Democrats, November 7th, 2018. The predictions were coming from the left, even Vox.com, saying that the allegations against Kavanaugh are going to help Republicans in the Senate, not the House. And that's exactly the result we got. So when Republicans credit the Kavanaugh effect for Senate wins, I don't disagree. Now when we see all of this fake news, the omissions, the smears, the lies, they're helping Trump. And that's not my opinion. It's The View. The View with Whoopi Goldberg, Abby Huntsman, Meghan McCain. They're the ones going out. I know McCain's conservative, but Whoopi Goldberg saying, how does this happen? Abby Huntsman saying, you are playing into Trump's hands. Yep, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. So in the end, I guess the important points to take away. As time goes on, the controversy just gets worse. Not only did they omit the information from the initial story, they omitted the information in interviews with NPR that was so glaring that the host had to add it in after the fact. They didn't say it. We learned that one of the reporters was a classmate of Kavanaugh. I kid you not. The corruption in media, the malfeasance, it's palpable. The news section passed on this story. Okay, I can respect that. But why the opinion section would pick this up and run with it? Why didn't they say they were classmates? It's really crazy, isn't it? It's just mind-blowing. And now we know that there was pressure on this woman. It's just so absurd. I don't really know what to say. But I'm glad to see we've got MSNBC and The View popping up and saying this is insane. Because here's the important thing. One of the greatest concerns I have is when the lie travels around the world before the truth can strap on its boots. At least this time, The View, MSNBC are highlighting this. I hope the truth can make the rounds. In the end, you ask Tim, why don't you talk about Mitch McConnell and the Senate Republicans and holding up legislation? Do you seriously think I care about the Senate Majority Leader holding up legislation? They do that all the time. The Democrats do it. The Republicans do it. It's business as usual. It's status quo. Whatever. I'd love to talk about it. I would love to absolutely criticize Mitch McConnell for holding up legislation and for holding up the Supreme Court hearings when Obama presented a moderate. I get it. What are we doing today? We're dealing with fake news smears and media malfeasance, okay? They wonder why all of these videos I do are so critical of the fringe far left and the corruption and the absurdity. It's dominating the media. The lies are so absurd. It's mind-blowing to me. The conflict of interest, the grasping at straws, the insane policy, it never ends. Okay, it's just getting worse. I can criticize Trump all day for policy and for being boorish, but it's just the same old. I said the same things about Obama. And now here we are. I can't believe it. The New York Times, no longer the paper of record. This is egregious. They were classmates, okay? Can I stress that to you? They were classmates. She should not be writing the book or the story. She is not an objective journalist. She's an active participant in the history of the school and these parties and what happened. And she might try to say, it didn't influence the book. Trust me, we weren't friends. It doesn't matter. Were you going to the same parties? Yes. I believe that is extremely likely. And it was omitted. It's all just fake news. I'll leave it there. Stick around. Next segment will be coming up, youtube.com/TimCastNews, starting at 6 p.m. Thanks for hanging out. It is a different channel. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I can't believe it's day 3 now with more and more details coming out, and it's this bad. Stick around. I'll see you shortly.